cherry burst, sunburst, Brock burst, tobacco, iced tea, lemon, or bourbon. If you're building your own guitar or finishing a kit, there's a good chance you're considering one of these many bursts. By the end of this video, you too can know a simple and forgiving way to achieve almost any type of burst, without any special equipment and for a very reasonable price. So stay with me. Let's burst a guitar. Hi, I'm Yoav and this is The Electric Luthier. The burst finish is part of rock and guitar history. And without getting into who made the first or the biggest burst, 50s and 60s, and even later models and reissues burst have decorated some of the most iconic guitars. Gibson's burst from 58 to 60 are highly sought after, and collectors and guitars will pay big money for it. Eric Clapton had a cherry burst Les Paul during Cream, and the famous Brownie Strat later in his career. Jimmy Page used a couple of famous Les Pauls. Kiss's Ace Frehley sported a 59, and let's not forget Slash, who some say single-handedly revived Les Pauls for a new generation. On the Fender side, there was no shortage either. I already mentioned Eric Clapton, but there were more with the likes of Eric Johnson and Stevie Ray Vaughan, just to name a few. Besides all that I think they're just beautiful, most bursts will be either 3-tone or 2-tone, and will either have a black outline or not. The black can be opaque and may also be used to hide imperfection or the fact that at the top is just a thin laminate. Technically, bursts are usually done with a spray gun in a well-ventilated and clean room and require good control of both the gun and the technique. You should probably also pre-mix and know exactly what colors you're going to be using. It takes a few, if not a few dozen bursts to get it just right. All that is not very friendly to the random guitar builder who may not have the equipment or the experience. Some bursts can be done with spray cans, but are limited and not very forgiving. To make things easy and forgiving, I will be using water-based dyes. You can use many types of dyes, and including alcohol-based or oil-based. But the main benefit of these water-based dyes is how, again, forgiving they are. You can correct and adjust your work and get out of pretty much any mistake and failed tests you can make. Chances are you're not going to nail down the exact colors, the relations, and the way they feather on the first try. And with these water-based dyes, you don't need to redo it. You can make most of the adjustments with almost endless working time. You can add color, dilute it, and to a great extent, remove it. I'm using multi-purpose RIT dyes, and I have 4 basic colors from which I can blend and mix pretty much all the common bursts and variations. I will link them below, and also a page where they have for many formulas for mixing them. I'll be using this pine, so do take into account that different woods will give slightly different colors, as well as the variations that the camera gives and my lighting. You can of course venture into the blues, purples, and greens, but for now I'm sticking with the more traditional bursts. Before I jump on the guitar body, I like to do a few tests to figure out how the dyes behave in this particular situation. I use scraps of the same pine I use for the body. I do 4 variations to test how the grain can be brought out in different ways. I'll use a black dye on the first and a brown one on the second. On the third, I'll just give a light yellow base, and the fourth will remain natural. The black and the brown ones will be sanded down so they go back to their natural color, leaving just the grain colored. This will enhance the character of the wood and grain. If you're using any type of quilted, flamed, tiger, or so on, this will give it more contrast and really make the texture pop. The brown base will do the same type of enhancement, but give it a more subtle and warmer tone. This can also be achieved if you're using grain filler. Gibson, for example, uses a reddish grain filler on their mahogany bodies. The grain filler will also give you a smoother surface if you're looking for that. By the way, dyes absorb into the wood and will contribute nothing to the grain filling or smoothing. So if you're using more open grain woods, take it into account before dyeing or staining, especially if you're aiming for a smooth or glossy finish. And if I mentioned smoothness, also take into account that nothing raises grain more than water. So it would also be a good idea to take a damp cloth and go over the surface, let it dry, and you will surely get a fuzzy surface which you can now sand back with the highest grit that you've already sanded it to. This can be repeated if your wood deserves it. We want all the sanding to be done before the final dye. One more thing about sanding, I've sanded up to 320 grit, and you can go up to 400 and even 600. Lower grits will let the wood absorb more color and may give deeper colors, but will be harder to correct later. How high you sand will depend on the type of finish you plan, as there will probably be further smoothing or polishing later in the process. I'll start by just applying each color side by side. I use a clean rag or lint-free shop towel for each color, and in the first pass, try and not touch or mix them. Then the mixing starts. I first go from light to dark, mixing the yellow into the red into the brown, and the brown into the black. After that, you just work with the balance. I use a dry towel this time to try and even the transition. I'll use the yellow or the lighter of the two to lighten an area and darken one to deepen the color. You can see that the process is very dynamic, and I can easily shift the transition both in position and in color. You can also see the effect the black or brown base we started with has compared to each other and to the yellow. Okay, this was a general getting to know you test with the colors. Now let's do a little more specific test with a classic lighter red to yellow sunburst and a tobacco burst. I'll do a black sanded base for the darker tobacco burst and a lighter brown sanded for the sunburst. I think the brown grain will blend better here with the red and the yellow, but you can use black for a more dramatic effect. Again, it also matters which type of wood you're using. I go back and forth, adding more color to deepen and to adjust the transitions. Since I didn't pre-mix the colors, there's no real difference between a 2 and a 3-tone burst. I can decide how defined I want to make each color or how uniformly I want to blend them. The water-based dyes can look a little dull when they dry, and unlike oil or alcohol-based stains, they will remain sensitive to water for a long time. One easy way to give them back that luster and protect them at the same time is simply oiling them. I put a link in the description to an article I wrote with more details about all these oils. I'm just going to use True Oil. I like it because it dries nicely and can also be layered to build a nice coat you can also buff to get a nice sheen. It also doesn't really change or add to the color. Coating with multiple layers of lacquer or polyurethane and then buffing should also provide the protection and vividness with an optional shine. Okay, let's do a more realistic test. I have a couple of pine caster bodies. I'll take the first one and give it a black base color for a tobacco burst. I'll let it dry about a half an hour to be on the safe side. Fast drying time is another benefit of these water-based dyes. I'll give the second body a brown coat to be the base and grain color for the sunburst. This will also be dried and sanded back. The sanding part is very critical to the character of the burst you're going for. Again, it also depends a lot on the type and look of the wood itself, but the shade, depth, and consistency of the sanding can make a difference. I'm leaving it on the rough side to achieve a more worn, beat-up look. If you want a more pristine look, you will need to thoroughly and very uniformly sand it to begin with, or not color the grain at all if the wood is right for it. I'll be doing this in 2 stages, and begin by just playing with the yellow and black. After that, I add a little bit of brown to better blend the two and warm it up a little. I go back to another pass of the black to darken the outline. I enthusiastically go a little too far. When I want to sort of erase the color, I could of course push it with more yellow, but I choose here to just use a bit of water to dilute and remove the color. The water brings the dry color back to life and allows working with it. After that, I choose to pre-mix a little bit of yellow and red to warm things up a little bit more. I give it another layer of the yellowish part and leave it to dry. I've been wetting the surface quite a lot, and I want to see how it will behave in the second round, after it's very dry. Now I start with a sunburst by coloring the outer part in red and the inner part in yellow. I'll use either the yellow or a clean towel to start blending the two. I start with a small round motion and go back and forth and around everything. Darkening is always easier than lightening, and after the final initial mix, I want to add a little red to the mix to darken and deepen it. Now that I've gone as far as the red can take me, I want to give the outline even a bit more contrast and darken it with black. I give a thin line to the outline and blend it in. This is not necessary for many of the lighter bursts. After the black, I also use some red to blend it even better. After letting the dye thoroughly dry for a few days, I wanted to see how they react at this point. I want to darken this and take this two-tone tobacco burst to a direction of a beat-up Eric Johnson Strat. I'll darken and deepen the yellow using a combination of the yellow with red. This will give me a more uniform color than if I just added more red to the existing yellow. It will also deepen the color and help me push the black back a little to give it a bit more definition. The more I play around with it, the harder it becomes to roll back to the lighter colors and finer definition. Even when dry, I can still revive the colors and work with them. When it comes to the blackened grain, which is actually in the underlying layer, this is something you do need to decide in advance. If I decide that I want to give it a more new look, I'll actually need to sand it back to bare wood and either skip the grain coloring or use a lighter brownish color as I used with the other sunburst. Going back to this one, I'm also going to give it another layer to darken and deepen the color to get it closer to this sienna sunburst. The black outline is not always used, and honestly, it's darker than I wanted because of the roughly sanded sides which soaked more dye. Unlike the tobacco burst here, I actually tried to and blur the lines and make the blending as clean and smooth as possible. These dyes offer a great option for those of us with less experience with sprays or who have no equipment to pull off the traditional bursts. The main benefit, again, is how forgiving these are. The almost endless drying time translates to the ability to correct mistakes on the fly. I've linked the very affordable RIT dyes below, as well as the company's page for color formulas. If you found this video helpful, please comment and like. There are also links and plenty of related articles on my website, theelectricluthier.com. But don't just read and watch the videos. Go ahead, build a guitar.